All right. Well, good day, everyone. This is Thomas Flitter with GovComms. This is Delegate Office Hour for Thursday. And we appreciate everybody joining us here today. And we've got a few items that I want to cover before we open the floor to the delegates. First one, I think Artem has posted in the chat for the information he's looking for the survey there, for communications update. Let's see. Also, I wanted to ask Raphael, did you have any updates that you wanted to provide for the group on your information that you were seeking as well? Did you take a minute just to update us on that?
I'm not sure I know what you mean. I can give an update about the prioritization framework.
Yes, that's the one I was referring to, Raphael.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. So I think Tim was gracious enough to introduce me to David Phelps, who's the CEO of JokeDAO, and together with JokeDAO, we are looking to launch a tool where we drop 100 tokens to every address that holds MKR. And these tokens can then be used in a 3-day submission window to submit a proposal, like what's the top priority for this particular MKR holding address for MakerDAO. And then in a 1-day voting period, these priorities can then be voted. We hope that this is like a gamified version to unearth some more preferences than we did with the Google Sheet. And there is a forum entry where you can read all about it, and I'm going to share the link ASAP in the chat. And then yeah, please pitch in, let us know if you have any comments, any changes that you'd like to see before this goes live. And also, like, from especially everybody here, I would like really ask if that's something that you feel can generate some value, please support it. I know there's a lot going on in the DAO at the moment, but I think this is just like a fun, light experience that could still yield a lot of value. And I hope we can get some traction here. So if you could take like 5 minutes or 10 minutes out of your busy schedule, then give it a read, let us know what we can do better, how to make that the best version it can be, and participate and promote as much as you can. Thank you very much.
All right.
I'll add a little bit more shilling for this, we'd like, for the record. So the funny thing about JokeDAO is the name, I guess, but more importantly is that JokeDAO does two things, right? It's kind of this sneaky governance tool, which we're actually just starting with, trying to use that for this priority framework to see what happens. It's also multi-chain, so it's really, really cheap. So I've been doing some other behind the scenes work to talk to the token drop folks. We figured we would take a snapshot of maker holders from September 1st and before that had half an MKR, and we would airdrop to them. Obviously, we'd include delegates, I think, would be the only sort of manual addition for this first experiment on trying to see if we can surface some priorities in a more organic way. But there are a lot of other things you can do with JokeDAO. It doesn't just have to be this one single vote. You can, I mean, there's just, the possibilities are endless. But the most fun part of JokeDAO is actually doing the joke race, where literally you get the entire community to use JokeDAO to present a joke about their community. And then on Friday, there's a live Twitter Spaces at noon EST, and it's just extraordinarily fun. So this is my sort of sneaky plan to not only give us an opportunity to try different governance tools and do different processes and kind of shake up some of these things that have been a little, I'm sure people have accused them of being stagnant or stale, but also maybe, hopefully, one day play a joke race, because I think we've got some pretty funny folks here. And so it'd be fun to see what happens. So that's my shilling. And yeah, I really look forward to people taking some time to give it a look. It's pretty lightweight. So see what happens.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. That sounds good. All right. Any other comments? Tim's, Raphael's? Okay.
I mean, if anybody has like whatever chain they'd want us to do it on, we were going to do it on Polygon. People have certain EVM chains they like more than others. JokeDAO is multi-chain, so just give us a holler. But probably putting that on the forum thread is most useful.
Okay.
Plus,
Great.
it's not gonna cost the DAO anything. Like Tim and I are gonna pay like the full cost, at least for the first round and the second one. And then if there's some traction, we can probably ask for an SPF or not, depending. The cost is super low at the moment on Polygon. It's yeah, we can definitely swing that. And right now it's not gonna cost the DAO anything. And I think like Tim mentioned, it's like a fun way to inject some lightness and gamification into the governance space. And I'm pretty excited about it, actually. Plus, David is a super cool guy. I think he's up to come on in the Delegate Hour, right? Like he could present that probably better than I could.
Yeah, I think, you know, he wrote the post. We helped him with that. You know, he's been a long time sort of maker observer. I'm not sure if he's an actual MKR holder or participant in the community, but he's would be happy to come to any meeting.
Okay, great. Just let us know how we want to coordinate that and we could get that going. Really appreciate it. And Raphael, thank you for posting that link in the chat as well. All right, let's take a look at what let's move on to the discussion topic. We had a poll this week and was put out about a day or two ago. And the winning topic, if you will, with 5 votes total, we had the winning topic was the Coinbase USDC institutional rewards. A number of you responded that was the topic that we'd like to focus on today. In particular, I think Raphael and Frank, you guys were interested in having that as our lead topic. Other votes included the in-game MIP set and strategic finance's involvement with Lido. So I'll open the floor if we want to start with this Coinbase USDC topic. Again, I'll let you guys start with this, or if we want to go into another direction, certainly up to you guys. Raphael, did you or Frank want to start us off with this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I read the proposal and I think it's extremely interesting, of course, because like earning some yield is obviously better than earning no yield. I just wanted to see like some input, especially on the risk side. Like the way I see it, risk does increase. Like I think Sam Hexonauts suggested that actually it doesn't change the risk from just holding USDC. But I mean, my question is this, like right now we hold USDC, right? So we have some counterparty risk with Circle, obviously. And then we take the USDC, give it to an arranger. So suddenly we have USDC risk plus smart contract risk plus counterparty risk to the arranger. And then the arranger invests it into Coinbase. So we have counterparty risk from Coinbase added, and then Coinbase invests it into something, which means there's an additional layer of risk from what Coinbase does. And I'm not sure how to quantify that. I mean, Coinbase is obviously like as respectable as it gets in the space, probably. But just wanted to hear some thoughts about that risk profile.
Yeah, so maybe I can clarify this part. And part of it, it's still a speculation. I wasn't in all the calls with Coinbase. It's more a market alliance that are working on it. But there is less risk than what you are saying. There are still risk, additional risk. So as you pointed out, there is a risk of holding USDC. And what we will have to do is to send those USDC to Coinbase custody, which is one of the services of Coinbase. Custody means that the assets are kept in our name. So it's not like we are giving the asset to Coinbase and we have a claim on Coinbase. They are just keeping it on our name. The legal implication will still have to be discussed. And we are not giving it through an arranger. It will be just like MIP65 or HVB. There will be one legal entity, an orphan entity, I don't know where it will be, managed by corporate servicers and with in the constitution saying, well, we should do whatever, or not whatever, but kind of follow the direction of MakerDAO governance. So the only additional risk you are taking, those two. One is Coinbase custody super safe? What happens if Coinbase is defaulting? It shouldn't work. It should work, but Coinbase custody is based, I think, in Ireland, or I'm not sure they are saying where it is, but it's an unregulated custodian. So no regulation, so you don't exactly know what could happen. It always depends on the bankruptcy laws, but it's not in the US, so it should be better than in the US. And the fact that you have a legal entity that should be able to get the USDC back. Because obviously, if in this legal entity, you have corporate servicers that are living the life in Cayman, if those doesn't trigger pull the cash from the custody to a wallet, that could be a problem. And maybe it will be possible to automate everything at the smart contract level. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that would be awesome, because then it means that whatever happened with the orphan entity, we don't care too much because most of the stuff is on-chain. But we still have the custodian problem. So it's a risk, it's a big amount. I guess it can be discussed, but it's significantly more risky. I think that custodian that would be a bank or something ultra regulated. It's not JP Morgan for sure, that we will have for Montalis and by default. But yeah.
Can you repeat that last part? My curiosity is whether this is more risky or less risky than the Monetalis, like MIP65, or any of the other upcoming like ways that we can get into treasuries.
No, so it's more risky than just holding the USDC in the PSM. It's less risky on the investment side than MIP65 because there is no duration risk, no credit risk, no risk on this side. But I think it's a bit more risky because on Monetalis, you have a JP Morgan and Bank Signum as custodian, which are JP Morgan is, well, both are super regulated. And on this one, you have a Coinbase custody, which is, I assume, not regulated and has not 100 years of operation, like JP Morgan.
Got it. Thank you.
Why did they want to hold it if it's not going to be lent out? Why do they want to hold it?
So I'm quite sure they will never say why, because they are quite clear. It's just a reward, not linked to anything they are earning on the other side. But you can check in the S4 from Circle. That Circle is giving some revenue share to Coinbase, part of the Center joint venture, which is issuing USDC. So Circle is issuing USDC, and I assume they will not tell it publicly, I guess, anyway, that the USDC that are sitting on Coinbase balance sheet and the USDC that are on custody at Coinbase, there is part of there is a revenue share. We don't know how much. Maybe they get 75%, 100%, 50% of what Circle is earning on those assets.
Hey, can you hear me or no?
Yeah, you're good, Frank. Go ahead.
Sebastian, I'm not sure if I understood you, but you said that the USDC and the PSM is less riskier or more riskier?
It's less riskier in the PSM than in custody of a third party. because I
Yeah,
trust
so-
Ethereum more. I trust our smart contract more than Coinbase, but other
Oh, in
people
that
can-
sense. Yeah. Because yesterday at the centrifuge, Eli Cohen, he actually spoke about how RWA or cash-like RWAs, as they're going to be branded now, they're actually more resilient against being sanctioned, right? Because it's a trust. And this is more than likely going to be a UK-Irish trust, since it's, because, you said it's similar to MIP65. So yeah, I would think it'd be easier to sanction the USDC and the PSM versus this one. So it'd be interesting to hear, some legal, yeah. I mean, you have to go see what Eli Cohen said, and I kind of agree with him, man, because, from my talks with Matt of Success Capital, the trust structure is a really hardcore structure that a lot of folks use, and you know this, Sebastian, that a lot of entities use to protect assets, and it's not easy to take money away from a trust, especially even like an individual's trust, right? Like I have a family member that works with individuals' trust, and man, you can't break that thing down at all. But anyway, so yeah, it's interesting. So I was hoping on this call we would hear more from, the legal side of things, but I don't think we have anyone right from the legal side anymore. So, but yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sebastian. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this? I know that in the chat we had something from Code Night saying something that's effectively, so this is effectively revenue share from Circle with a major USDC holder. I think Tim replied, yeah, that's the framing. Floor is open if anybody has any more thoughts or questions or comments.
Yeah, I'll be the wet blanket. Does anybody want to unpack the theory about why we treat USDC like as a protocol controlled thing? I mean, it's what backs DAI now. In the PSM specifically.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't acoustically understand one. I think the main ask.
I think it was about rehypothecating the USDC, since it's not like, is that right?
No, it's about moving it at all, right? Users have put USDC into mint DAI against. Why do we assume that we can do anything with it, right? I'm sort of treating this half philosophically, but more just kind of trying to steel man the understanding of.
Well, from a practical matter, it's I mean, the idea is that you're swapping, right? It's not a deposit. Nobody ever says that it's depositing to borrow DAI against USDC. If it was loaning, then DAI against USDC, then I guess potentially Maker could be exposed to some other regulations about commingling of assets and stuff. But I think it's probably. I mean, has anyone ever said that it ever described it as borrowing? I mean, I would say it should come down to what our communications have been to users.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Also there's also the other thing of like having DAI's backing be like high integrity. And so if you're taking the stuff that's backing DAI one for one, right? It's not over collateralized, it's like equally collateralized, then yeah, you're risking basically the collateral that's backing some DAI. So if you lose on that, then you got to cover it with surplus buffer somehow. So really, like, it's existential risk equals like however much exposure over the surplus buffer, like, then it becomes existential.
Yeah, but that doesn't really change with the current proposal, right? We just shift some of that risk from the holding it in the PSM to holding it in a custodian, and obviously this entails the custodian risk that Sebastian talked about. But apart from that, we're not really changing the risk profile. I mean, that's kind of my question, is like, are we changing the risk profile significantly or not?
It depends on how much we give to Circle, I mean, right? Because either way, this is rehypothecation. you're taking something on your balance sheet that others should have an ability to swap into, and you're making it unavailable so that our organization can make a revenue off of it. So I don't know. I think it's okay, but it has to be risk adjusted, and I think that our surplus buffer prevents us from doing really big deals like this, in my opinion.
Raphael, you got your hand raised? Go ahead.
Code Knight was first.
Oh, Code Knight. Okay.
I just wanted to comment. If this is indeed like Circle just sharing revenue with us, isn't that like the opposite of rehypothecation? Like, because it's rehypothecation when Circle does their, buys treasuries and issues USDC, but we're actually like reducing at least Circle's risk, right? Because we're having this USDC in a trust structure instead of like using it to buy even more treasuries with it. So it seems like the opposite of rehypothecation. If it's that way, it's actually like reducing the leverage on USDC.
Yeah, but it's increasing our own exposure. So in that sense, it's the downside of rehype. I don't know. Actually, I'll pause and listen to others.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I think it's a really interesting point, but I think, like, first of all, we're not changing out of USDC, right? It's just USDC that's then held by Coinbase, so it's still USDC. So all the Circle exposure stays the same. At least that's how I understand it. And I mean, I'm happy. Sorry to be corrected here, but the way I understood it, and also after Sebastian's explanation, is that we keep the USDC, so all this exposure stays the same, but holding it inside of Coinbase, we get to share a little bit of Circle's revenue, right? Or maybe even a substantial part of it. But what I wanted to look like also, as far as I've understood it, it's pretty liquid. Like we can withdraw it from there at any point. Like, what's the time frame here? I think, as far as I understood from the proposal, that's like pretty instant withdrawal, right?
So in the proposal, it says 6 minutes, but the question is, who gives the orders? And if you need a trustee to give the order to Coinbase, you need a governance decision. And welcome to MakerDAO, everything takes 1 week. If a facilitator make it urgent.
Yeah, so that's the point I put my hand up to make there, is like, yes, technically for Circle to process it, it's probably going to take 6 minutes, but for Maker Governance to actually get that instruction to Circle, presumably via, a governance vote and then an executive, the MIP's slightly lacking in that regard for how that communication happens from Maker to Coinbase. And so actually having that defined somewhere would be really helpful before we put this to a vote.
All right. Thank you, Patrick, for that information. I appreciate it. I think, Josh, you got your hand raised. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just to follow on what Patrick was saying, I think it would be really cool if we had some special process to pull the USDC back into the PSM, like at a moment's notice. So like we wouldn't have to wait on governance to, something like what's it called again? IAM. So we could move the money back and forth between the PSM and Coinbase really fast instead of waiting for governance. That'd be a nice thing to add to the MIP.
So from Maker's side, that would be fully dependent on Coinbase integrating such a system, because we can build IAMs, we can build, alert modules. We could deposit slowly over a period of time, and we could also get it to read the amount of USDC currently in the PSM, so that we could then withdraw from Coinbase to prevent it falling below a certain amount. That would be another way to do it. But the problem is actually getting Coinbase to agree to using that system, and that's going to be the problem. So I don't know if anyone from maybe StratFi has discussed that process with Coinbase, Seb, but it's going to be difficult for us to enforce that unless it's specified in the MIP.
All right, thank you. And we got some folks from Strategic Finance here that want to
Yeah, it's
comment on that.
we've already talked to Coinbase about fully automating it, and they're on board with doing that. So it's just, you know, a matter of time, really. We wanted to get this first MIP approved and then work on automating once we have an ALM structure in place, because that's really the only thing that's going to need to be done to automate it.
All right, thank you, Mark, for those comments. Appreciate that. Just kind of looking through the chat. There was a comment just made here. It says, do we have 100% understanding that the yield from the Coinbase deposit would be a revenue share with Circle Coinbase of their main strategy of generating yield? That was brought up a question. I didn't know if you wanted to follow up on that one. That I saw in the chat. Oh, actually, thanks, Sebastian, you followed up. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah, I just want to note that Coinbase said in the forum that it's not linked whatsoever with a possible yield they get from Circle. We can make speculation, but they said it's not linked. So they can give us whatever they want and commercially want. And if they are making investment on their side, it shouldn't be a problem to generate this yield. It shouldn't be a problem as long as USDC were there. It's still in custody, and they are not using those USDC to generate the yield. Just like we could have a DSR at 6%, even if we are not generating 6% on DAI on the asset side.
And can anybody speculate where the yield is coming from? Trading fees, maybe?
But does it really matter? I mean, that's kind of their business in a way. As long as the USDC is in our custody and we get yield on that, then I think it's really their business how they generate the yield, right?
Well, it matters if you look at Three Arrows Capital and Celsius. I would say, hell yeah, it matters, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, because even if they are giving us 0%, if they are reckless on the other side of their business, they can still go bankrupt, even if you don't get anything. So we still have a concern about how reckless they can be on the other side of the business. But it's a public company, so we can follow the financials.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like, has any of your team members dug into the shareholder financial reports, the 10Q, sorry.
Yes, I published something for MIP65 because we are going through Coinbase as well. It was less a deep analysis because we are still using Coinbase only for swap very shortly. For MIP65, maybe we should do a more detailed analysis. Just to the question on the source of yield, if you go on the S3 of Circle, which is the issuer of USDC, you can see somewhere in the document that USDC is subject to a revenue share agreement as part of the partnership with Coinbase. So that can give you an idea of maybe where the yield is coming from and why Coinbase has some interest to do this operation. But again, it's only speculation.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Does anyone have any additional comments on this topic? This is good conversation. Good conversation.
Yeah, there's definitely like more to unpack here, right? So I'm looking forward to more details down the road, and it'd be nice to get some kind of legal not only just view and opinion, but
Mhm.
also kind of like what's the downside, especially being in a trust, right? So because if you look at like some of the sanctions against some of the Russian oligarchs, some of those dudes that live in the UK, they're living it up over there. Some of the stuff was sanctioned from them, their yachts, et cetera, but those trusts that held the yachts weren't under their names, right? So I would imagine that this trust and MIP65 trust won't be under MakerDAO, right? Correct, Sebastian? And then you sanction MakerDAO as an entity, and I'm just speculating here. I just don't see how a trust that's named ABC Trust is correlated to MakerDAO. But maybe, again, I don't know anything about trust as much as someone else who does trust well knows.
As we are publishing all documents publicly, let's say we end up on the OFAC list. I mean, everyone will see clearly that those trusts or slash foundation, even if you are not the beneficiary. For instance, for MIP65, it's written that Maker token holders are the beneficiary. So MakerDAO is kind of the beneficiary. So if MakerDAO is on the OFAC list, obviously this is a direct, not assets, but asset-like of MakerDAO, so it will be sanctioned. And for the other one, I guess it will be almost the same thing. It's obvious because we are super transparent in what we are doing. And obviously those are not in the US, so you cannot block something that easily, I guess. But even if you just look at Tornado Cash, the guy that was arrested wasn't in the list. He wasn't in the US, but he was arrested. So
yeah, and I'm not trying to compare the Ukraine-Russian war to MakerDAO, but yeah. So looking forward to the experts to kind of give us an opinion. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So I'm just, from what I'm understanding of this conversation, we have follow-up or discussion as I think we're talking understand the risk and the legal aspects, and is that so? Just asking from that perspective, does anybody have any thoughts or ideas on those next steps, perhaps? Didn't know if we want to.
I
Go
think
ahead,
it
I'm
would
sorry.
be, no, it's cool. I think it would be important. Like, I really love what GovAlpha does with a lot of proposal summaries where they just bullet point out like the main points. I'm not saying that exactly for the Coinbase proposal, but I would love to see like a shared list of pros and cons that like maybe multiple delegates can add onto, because ultimately, you guys are trying to come to a decision of should we do this or not.
Mhm.
And I think to come to that decision, all of the pros and cons got to be in like one like referenceable place. Something that I struggle with at Maker, and also as the facilitator of the communications team here, is kind of like issue synopses. Like pros and cons. Like we get so much in these conversations, but it's not written out anywhere like in this like one concrete place. So yeah, that's something that's on my mind.
Thank you, David. Follow up to that? I think we got a couple of, I think Patrick said, agree, David. I think that would be helpful. Patrick, any other thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, the GovAlpha summaries tend to focus on process more than anything because we have a neutrality mandate. So we can't necessarily come in and say this proposal is a bad idea because of X, because that would be not neutral. So we can comment on governance processes, and we can comment on issues such as we discussed with the kind of timing of getting an instruction from governance to Coinbase, because that's a governance process. But we can't really comment on the risk of a proposal or anything like that. So someone who's not GovAlpha making a similar kind of summary, I think, is a good idea.
All right, thank you, Patrick, for that.
Yeah, I think it also would be good, right? Because I think the community is going to be kind of, I mean, you're already seeing it, right? Some folks are against it. They don't understand it. And some might get an idea of what it's going to be, but they exactly don't know what it's going to be. So there's a lot of noise going on there. So what David said, a bullet point where you kind of give the pros and the cons would definitely be helpful. And even though I don't think it's going to sell the opponents of RWAs or cash-like RWAs, but at least, yeah, that'd be super cool if we can somehow get that done.
All right, thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. Raphael, you just raised your hand. You got the floor. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just saw that David Phelps joined from JokeDAO. So like, if it's okay for everybody, could we give him just 5 minutes to walk us through JokeDAO and what's possible there? Because yeah, we have the good luck to have him on the call now.
That's great.
You'll decide that after 5 minutes.
No, that's great. Welcome, David. You have the floor. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. So Raf, just before I start spieling away, are there specific things that's helpful for me to talk about? Because I know you've already spoken a little bit about some of the ideas we have.
Yeah, basically, Tim and I just have been shilling the process and the proposal you put forward, and so maybe you can give us some background about like what JokeDAO, what kind of governance scenarios that enables, and why we should do that. You know, like give us a little pitch there.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I would also just say, please cut me off or jump in if you have questions. I don't want to say anything that's too obvious. Really the way we conceive of governance is trying to unlock community voices to have more participation within the governance process themselves. A lot of times when we hear about issues with governance, the focus is on the voting and the voting mechanisms. And what we're really focused on is the speaking part and the ability of communities to have their own voices heard. And so the way we set it up is it's very simple. There's a submissions period where if you set up what we call a contest with a prompt, for example, what do you think our priority should be in this community? Anyone from your community can then respond with proposals in response. And so they can write a proposal saying, you know, we think that the top thing we should be worried about is real world assets, right? And someone else could say, you know, depegging is what we want it to be. And so you can have everyone from the community write in what they see as their top let's say concerns, issues, priorities. And then the other nice thing is in the voting period, you can allocate voting tokens however you want to your community, and then they can vote. And so you actually get a list of that's prioritized according to how much people prefer certain options as well, right? So instead of the traditional yes/no voting, where only the core team is going to the community and saying, do you approve yes or no? And then everyone might feel compelled to vote one way or another. This way, there's no negative voting. You're not voting against anything. You're just voting for the things that you care about most. And that way you're actually getting a prioritized list of what's most important to you. And so what we discussed in the proposal for MakerDAO is using this for building soft consensus. So step one would be doing a contest like the one I just mentioned, where you could go to the community and say, what are your top priorities? And you could get very kind of like rough pulse check, right, to see where people are landing, what they really feel. It's helpful almost as like a user survey. Then let's say like they say real world assets is like our top thing that we care about most, right? You're also surfacing data about who cares about that, how much they care about it, what percentage of votes they put towards it, where the alignment is between different people as well. And so there's a lot of data that you can get for your community as well, where maybe if you look at the number 10 option, which very few people care about, you can say, okay, but the people who cared about this put all their tokens towards it, maybe they should form a subgroup and try to really focus on this because they're very passionate about this as well. So for a second contest, you could then say, real world assets is our top one. We're now accepting proposals for what you want us to do with real world assets, right? And then it can get a little bit more formal. So you can now have your community, you know, write in proposals saying, we really want to focus on the housing market, or we really want to focus on the rainforest, you know, whatever it is. And you can ask for, you know, to say, we want you to write up answering these 4 questions, you know, in these 3 pieces as well. And what's nice about this is that traditionally proposals are always written by the builders themselves saying, here's the project I want to do. What you're getting in this case is the community being able to say the projects they want to see, even though they're not necessarily the builders themselves. And so that just expands the surface area of ideas of what's out there while getting a better, pulse check on what the community wants. But for builders, it's also really nice because they can actually see what the community wants and they know what is most likely to get passed. And then in a final contest, what you could do is you could say, okay, we have a proposal now. What do you guys think of it? And then people can actually submit different versions of it. And so, something we've seen in Maker, for example, we've seen in all DAOs is a lot of times proposals get shot down because people have different reasons for disliking it. They might like it overall in terms of the principle, but they might not like the budget. They might not like the team. They might not like the timeline. And so these different cohorts of no votes tend to group together and shoot down proposals that might have been popular. And so by using it in this way, you can actually have people say, yeah, look, I like the proposal overall, but I've changed the budget. Or I've liked the proposal overall, but I've changed the timeline. And then build consensus around the best version of the proposal to go through so that you're much more likely to actually build consensus within the community. And because people have really joined together around the best version of the proposal as well. So those are kind of the three use cases that we see for DAO governance. And yeah, I think the proposal that we put forward was, why don't we start with the pulse check? It's the one that's lowest stakes, it's the most fun, and maybe it'll be useful data, but we can play with it and see if that's helpful, just to get a sense from community what they're looking for.
And I just want to add, all of that process is different from what we can do in the forum, because these tokens are involved, and it's even though the tokens are worthless, it's still another act of commitment that's necessary than just writing in the forum. So I think it's a different dynamic. It's a little bit more gamified. So I think, yeah, it's just a really an experiment that I'd love to see run, and that I'm really curious and excited about.
Yeah, I didn't hit on those 2 points. One is that it is on chain. So because you'll have a voting token that you share with your community, you can do it on any L2 you want. So you can do it on Optimism, you can do it on Polygon. Voting is extremely cheap, fractions of a cent. And so it really enables everyone to participate in voting on chain. And the benefits of on chain are that you have all that data. Everything I talked about before, that now is there, it's immutable. And so if you want to find alignments between your community, how they're voting, all of those things, you can create Dune dashboards and break that down. The other thing is the gamification. And so that's the fun piece of this, is we are trying to make governance a lot more fun. So it's not a pain to go and have to vote against options that your friends put forward. But instead, when you basically have these two variables of how many tokens do you have and how much longer do you have to vote, you have a lot of strategy decisions you have to make of do I put my votes towards that thing that I don't think anyone else is going to support? And do I put all my tokens towards that because I want to raise it to the top and signal to others to support it as well? Or do I start working with other people to try to build consensus so that I'm most likely to have mine go through? And it creates relationships and teams out of this gamification as well.
Cool.
Great.
Thanks a lot, David. So if anybody has any more questions, then please go ahead and ask them. And otherwise, love to see your comments on the forum.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. And Raphael.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Is there, I've opened the floor to any questions or comments on David's, Raphael's? All right. Well, David, listen, thank you so much. And I think we'll have some follow-up conversations, certainly. Appreciate you joining us here today. Any other parting thoughts for you, David?
I'm going to drop my Telegram
right.
in the general group. And if anyone wants to reach out to me privately or has any questions, please feel free.
All right. Again, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
All right. All right. We've got about 10 minutes left in our meeting here. I didn't know if we'll open the floor back up to the discussion topic with the USDC. Didn't know if there's any more follow-up that we wanted to touch on this or any other topic that folks wanted to discuss.
Thomas, I had a question, and
Yes.
it's really just it's a thought question, and I don't have an answer to it, and I'd love to hear some feedback from the delegates on it. It has nothing to do really with what we talked about today.
Sure,
But
Robert. Go ahead.
As we go forward, in the endgame plan, Rune's got some very specific ideas. And so what I've read so far is that there's an effort on his behalf to pull back in the MKR that he's delegated. And it seems just a little strange and odd to me, because as a core unit trying to figure out my next steps in the context of the end game, I also look at our community and I look at the DBC, the delegates, and other entities and actors. And I really try to understand like the overall dynamics. And if effectively there's this back and forth of the delegates being stripped of their powers, what exactly are the purpose of the delegates? I mean, if you're asked to vote a specific way, that's not delegation. And do you see a point in time where that changes? Or because I don't think Rune's going to give you his MKR. So I don't know. Fundamentally, I'm just struggling with that one, because it's like right now we have one person that is in charge, and it's important that we all take a look at what the preferences are to understand the directions. Now, I could make the case that that gives us a heck of a lot more clarity than what we've had, and I'm supportive of that. But it doesn't really, it's not true to the essence, I think, of what is trying to be created in the DAO. So I don't know, just throwing that out there. If anyone has any comments, I'm sort of struggling with that myself.
All right, thank you, Robert. I'll open the floor to comments.
Yeah, I can add two pieces there. So I think Monet Supply had a pretty good reply to incentivized vote plans, I guess. And I really thought that I articulated the options for Rune, who is our biggest delegator. I'll definitely take a side note to say there is still quite a bit of MKR that has not been delegated. So it's kind of on delegates to sort of figure out how to get that out there. And then the second thing is, you know, we have the entire month for RFC on the endgame MIP set. And so I am going to spin up a weekly RFC sort of committee, I guess, so that we can hopefully provide feedback like that. Because it definitely currently seems like it puts governance into pretty interesting quagmire. And it would be good to put a bunch of brains towards a better solution. So.
All right, thank you, Tim. Appreciate those comments. Anyone else like to add to that? Or add to Robert's thoughts?
I think, Robert, there's a really good point that there's like no minimum time on delegation, and that kind of like in a way even compromises or makes like delegates I don't know, compromises delegates to some extent. I mean, I'm just thinking about, if you think about proxy voting in traditional companies, then it's much of the same. Like if somebody doesn't like a proxy and the way they vote, they just choose another one, right? So I'm not sure. I think in a way it boils down to just staying principled to some extent, and then also being of service to the one that delegates to you. I think it's like how do you understand being a delegate? But I think it's a very interesting discussion, and it's a really good point you're making. So I don't really have a tight answer there. I'm just thinking that I personally love to see some minimum amount of delegation time, because that would just unstress the whole thing, and I think would lead to much more risk taking, which I think is something that's definitely a good thing.
I mean, just to follow up on that, there's, I think Tim said, you know, over 800,000 MKR out there that's not voting, right? So, I mean, what can you expect from the guy? If the guy wants to send his MKR to the pause proxy, good for him, you know, like he has a right to do whatever he wants with his MKR. If I was in his shoes, honestly, I would just vote myself. I wouldn't even delegate. But that's just me because I like making my own decisions, and I'm pretty much like in this ecosystem pretty much every day, right? I have nothing better else to do, unfortunately. But so I don't know. I mean, can we wake up Paradigm? Can we wake up, Dragonfly? Can we wake up A16Z to delegate more? I don't know. I mean, they tried. At least A16Z is trying. I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I have friends that have MKR. They don't delegate to me. They don't even want to leave Coinbase or Kraken. So I don't know what to tell you. It's just it's one individual who supported the delegate introduction by Gov Alpha. He tried with the hope that others will follow. Then there would be a lot of delegating from the big whales, and some of the OGs who have a bunch of MKR were gonna either become delegates or delegate. But there's just no incentive there, right? So nobody gives a damn, right? Like I can't motivate my friend to move the MKR out of a Coinbase because what for? Like the UX alone is crappy. So why not just stay at Coinbase and like have the same experience as opposed to delegating, getting nothing for it? So I just don't know, how do you resolve this? How can you resolve this? It's one individual who has the right. I am Mio or whatever his name is said it best. Like he's a whale. He can do whatever the hell he wants. And if he wants to undelegate for every single one of us, he should. I don't think there should be any reason why he should stop.
Yeah, I think we're having like kind of separate conversations. One's like about, Rune Stack and his delegate preferences and voting preferences. And the other, which I think is a more interesting one to me, is how do we get, the other 800K maker that's not regularly voting to vote. One thing that, is nice about the Coinbase deal is, the closer we work with them, I think the more we can start to, invest in, projects to essentially build out delegate infrastructure on their platform. So I'd love to have, Coinbase, build an integration, so there people that own Maker don't want to move off the exchange can, delegate through Coinbase, and then Coinbase is kind of handling, the delegation in the back end. So it's, and I'm sure like, that could be a business for them in the future. Whereas like, to start, I'm sure they'd offer it for free, but I think that's one way, is getting these exchanges that have, a good amount of Maker to, enable their users to do it and have like a, campaign that, Maker can fund to, advertise that for everyone that owns tokens, like in their Coinbase accounts or their Binance accounts, for example. Because there are just a lot of small holders, I think, they're just afraid to move their coins off the exchange because they don't trust themselves.
All right, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to respond. Like, it's simple. You just add like a 40% staking reward for putting money in your Maker in the governance contract, and then everyone on Kraken or Coinbase or whatever would either sell their Maker or they get it in the contract. Like, that's the incentive, and it costs us nothing to do, right? It doesn't cost the Makers holders anything as long as they have in the contract. And then the people who don't just get diluted out until their Maker's worthless.
All right. Thank you all for those comments, Raphael. You got your hand raised. Raphael, I'm gonna go to you last because I know we need to wrap up here. We got the GNR call coming up. So Raphael, go ahead.
I'll comment about these 800K of potential delegation available. I think that number is not correct. It's actually lower. I don't know how much exactly, but we looked at MKR holding addresses that are not exchanges and that even have gas like ETH in there to be able to affect delegation. And then the whole number is a lot lower. I think like maybe half, maybe even less. We're still figuring out the exact number. It's obviously some parameters that go in there, but it's definitely not 800K.
All right. Wow, this really has some great comments and feedback. Really appreciate, Robert. Thank you for bringing this up. unfortunately, we are at time for today. I know that we want to continue this conversation, but I think some of this may move over to the GNR call as well for a discussion topic. I do want to thank everyone for joining us here today with all your great comments and feedback. Again, this recording should be up tomorrow for your viewing. And I want to thank you all. Hope you have a great rest of your day and hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.